Hello, welcome to the Secure by Design podcast with VALERE Architects and Sapphire Risk Advisory Group. I'm James Sowell. I'm Vice President of VALERE Architects. We specialize in cannabis facility design for retail, cultivation, manufacturing, all spaces from seed to sale. Welcome, Tony.
I'm Tony Gallo. I'm the managing partner of Sapphire Risk Advisory Group. We've been in the cannabis industry 11 years. We are one of the oldest national security consulting companies in this industry. And in that time, we've worked with about 800 cannabis clients in 37 states, including having helped open over 160 locations nationwide. So good to be on this call. Thank you, Jim. So I think today we're going to talk a little bit about security designs and how what you do and what we do is so important as working as a team and getting into some of those questions of how does an architect like yourself and how does someone who like Sapphire, so we consider ourselves a security architect. Obviously, we don't have the experience of designing the actual full floor plan, but we design the security overlay, the video, the alarms, the access control for this facility, much like an architect. And then we hand that over to a construction company or to a security integrator who actually puts up the equipment after the design. Uh,
Right. So your part of the process happens in tangent with our early design phases. We'll send you an overlay of the schematic floor plan. You do your pass at security in the beginning. That's often used for license applications or early licensing requirements for these cannabis retail locations. And then from there, as our floor plans evolve, we coordinate with you for revised floor plans so you can adjust your security overlay as needed.
I think it's important, that when the architect starts his design and his vision of the facility, that he starts to incorporate and bring in other departments such as the security group to see how that's going to fit in. And we've done so many architectural designs. We're working with architects on the application, and I really can't think of one application design that when it eventually got to time of construction that a change wasn't made from the time you apply. Because if you think about it, in most states, from the time of application to the time of construction could be anywhere from 6 months to 3 years, depending on how far that is. And does this wall change? Is there a different vision by the owner? So a lot of times when we get involved with you at the beginning, we're working at what I call an application design. And that is something that you would submit to get approval. The city might give you approval, the state gets approval. But a lot of times, that design, when it gets to construction, completely changes. And, it's important to be able to be involved at that point, from my point of view, is to be from the beginning concept. And then as we go through it, all the way to the time that we actually start to do the construction.
Right. Yes. And as the evolving needs of a client's operational ideas progress through the design phase, often walls do move, especially with crafting a unique retail experience on the sales floor. We often incorporate architectural elements that have an impact on your security camera sightlines and other aspects like that.
No, I think you brought up a very good point about sight lines. How do you make a design, when it comes to the security part, more cost effective? I don't think a lot of people realize that on average, if you built an access control device, which is the proximity card that you would use on a door, installed runs you close to $3,000. So if in during the design, if the architect could eliminate three doors or change something that would eliminate three doors, that's $9,000 in savings alone just on the security equipment, not counting construction and all. So a lot of times, I think the value that we bring Again, we're not an integrator, so we're not just going to install the equipment just as if someone told us to do based on a floor plan. But a lot of times we can give that suggestion, having been involved and having watched, and helped build all these dispensaries. I think your team and our team working together has really proven very not only cost effective though, but the day to day security needs of the locations, I think, are important.
Right, so let's dive into that a little deeper. How can a dispensary layout streamline daily operations like inventory management, cash handling, and how does this differ between new builds and existing spaces?
Well, I think there's a huge difference between a new build and existing. And the new build is a clean canvas, and the architect's going to do his painting of that location. A lot of the best practices that you've learned nationwide can be applied to that new build. A lot of best practice from a security point of view could be given input about that. I think when you look at existing, that's really where the challenge is. What was it before? Was it a restaurant? Was it an auto parts dealership? Was it a bar? We see a lot of that on the East Coast. We do a lot of existing bills in New Jersey and New York, and maybe not as many as we did, say, in Oklahoma or Ohio or somewhere else. Where there's a fresh pad there for that. And, I think a lot of the time when you look at that, you want to look at the two processes of a new build is making sure that there's a flow. I think from a security point of view, and then I think from an architect's point of view, and then from a business point of view, one of the biggest focuses we have is what is the flow of business as the customer walks in, how are they being serviced, how do they pass the security screening at the front, how does they flow through the dispensary or the retail store, how do they make their purchases, what if they need to use an ATM, where's the bathrooms, and so forth. How does that product come in from the back room that makes the employees not have to go in the back room to get the product. We do high risk businesses, and when you look at the jewelry industry or the pawn industry or the firearm industry, there's a lot of the same processes of, okay, I'm going to buy a cannabis product. Is the cannabis product in the back room? Now, do I have to leave the sales floor to go get the product, or can the product come to me? And I think that's a lot of times when that's at the initial stages where the architect is valuable and adding that to the client.
Right, right. We see whether it's existing or new construction, we see there's a pretty hard divide for front of house space and back of house spaces. And we're seeing some trends with those back of house spaces combining secure storage and fulfillment. So there's fewer access control points between those two functions, and then providing a direct connection from fulfillment secure storage to the sales counter area. And then additional back of house spaces in terms of access control, we try and create efficient circulation in that space to reduce the number of access points that require expensive hardware, to your point, upwards of $3,000 per door. We're also seeing a trend with dedicated delivery vestibules. So often with existing renovations, inline tenant spaces, typically there's one or two doors on the back of the space. We like to separate when possible the employee entrance and exit and a dedicated delivery area. That way, product being delivered has a secure delivery vestibule that connects directly to the secure storage, and that doesn't get in the way of employees going out for break or other daily operations of a business not related to product delivery. And then the other important part with our secure storage that we focus on in the beginning is, really digging into the operational approach that our clients have if they know those at that time. For example, we were working on one smaller dispensary, and they were going to have minimal staff in the evenings when it was slower. So they were going to have one staff member working in secure storage and fulfillment, and another one working security check-in. So we had to make sure that we provided sight lines from that secure storage area to the sales floor so that there was proper, that employee could see when a customer walked into the space.
No, and I think that's an excellent example of how important design is in a lot of facilities. We come across individuals that are just starting in the cannabis industry and maybe not understanding how the flow. And I think what you keep saying is, how is there a flow, and how does the customer and the team member interact with each other? And one of our main goals when we do a design, we do the overlay of video alarms, access control from a physical security point of view, but really the big overall package we call it is a culture of honesty. How do we design a facility that not only is secured but makes the customer feel secure and safe when they're in there? And that's the important aspects of, we look at the lighting outside of the facility. We want to make sure that the parking lot is clean, and we want to make sure that there's a good flow to the parking lot, that there's not a confusion of where to park or not to park, or what the flow of a customer when he enters into the facility, where he's to go, and how they not only feel safe and secure, but what does that design show that communicates the culture of honesty? I think, one of the things that you and I were talking about earlier before we got on the call is that sight line, and are there any areas where either the customer feels not safe, or there's a security challenge because there's a corner, or the lighting is not adequate wherever they might be, or the employee doesn't feel secure, like you said, in the back room areas of that, and I think a lot of that, when we do those designs, and I've been in the high risk retail business over 20 years, is a very important aspect that sometimes a lot of new business owners forget, because they're looking at, oh, well, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this kind of design, or I want to have a waterfall or a tree in the middle of the room, or something of that nature. But then really at the end of the day, you want to say to them, yeah, but is this practical? Is this, one of the things I come away with a cannabis client, and it pertains to other industries too, is, does that customer come in the store have an experience? Do they come in,
Right.
is there, do they enjoy where they're walking? Is the design something that's favorable to them, where they can see something? Do they want to touch things? There are displays that you can pick up and look at things. Is my desire to come in and get whatever I want and leave, or is my desire to come in and understand a little bit more? If I wanted to have a one-on-one conversation, is there a place that I can go and have a conference? Things of that nature. Is the aisles inviting, where I can, if I'm a handicap, can my wheelchair go down there, or something of that nature? And I think that, when you guys do your designs, I think that's one of the things that we really enjoy working with you on, is because it makes our life so much easier when your design is really geared towards the business of cannabis, more so than anything. So, it is important to that. And, again, like we said, with the access control and all.
Right. And the cannabis industry has its unique challenges and its unique charm. But for a retail environment, at the end of the day, it is a retail experience. There's a lot of overlap to traditional retail. Natural lighting on your sales floor, creating an inviting space, providing that unique customer experience that matches with their brand identity, and how design can play a role in crafting that to be successful. I think one of the most important aspects architecturally for creating a sense of safety and trust that we focus on at VALERE is the entry experience. When markets open up, often you'll see the first round of dispensaries have a fully frosted storefront. The entry door and the entry windows on that retail space often it's a solid wall of privacy film. You can't see into the store in any way. And I think that's a backwards approach to retail experience. If you go to any other type of store, it's about creating an inviting and open and comfortable entry to that store. You want to draw people in, and cannabis isn't any different. So one thing we like to focus on is designing the lobby in a way where, through the architectural design, we can have those sight lines meet requirements that differ state by state, for seeing product and not seeing product until after you have your ID checked. So creating a space where doors and sight lines allow us to maintain an open storefront with glazing that's not covered in privacy film, and then you add the correct lighting inside that lobby. A customer approaching that store, whether they've been there before or this is their first time, maybe it's their first time purchasing cannabis at all, and there's some stigma, they might be nervous. So creating a well-lit, inviting lobby space where you can see there's people inside, you can see there's activity, that's a huge part in creating these successful retail environments.
That's a perfect example of, when I walk into a dispensary and I come into that lobby area where I check my ID, it may not be well lit. There's one person sitting there waiting for you to give me an ID. There's a list of do's and don'ts on the wall. There's more cameras than you ever need. There's a security guard that,
Right, right.
that he's built like there's going to be he's going to go to war somewhere. It's very intimidating,
And
and
that's the customer's first experience with
exact.
your brand, with
It,
your business, and that needs to
it,
be designed correctly. Yeah.
I agree. I've seen some. There's trade routes in Massachusetts. I love the fact that when you can go into that location, you can actually see the grow behind the glass. I mean, it kind of gives you that inviting element. Or I've been to other locations where there's a waiting room lobby, or there's something of that nature, or you just there might be some monitors on the wall when you walk in, talking about the product or your experience that you're going to have there. I think one of the best facilities when it comes to customer experience is Planet 13 in Vegas. That it's an inviting location when you walk in. Obviously you can't go to that extreme, but there's a pizza place right there. There's a whole glass area that even before you walk in, you can watch like the guys making chocolate, like Willy Wonka in the Chocolate Factory. But there also, from my end, there's a level of security that you also feel there. You feel protected. You don't feel that you're vulnerable. And I think, I think the experience in the cannabis industry, if it doesn't start in the parking lot, it starts when you walk in. And right there, that's where you're going to get that customer engaged or not engaged. And I think a lot of people, a lot of owners sometimes miss that one point.
Yes, and that mindset should carry through to how your customers exit that space as well. So security, as we've been talking about, goes beyond just the physical equipment, and it comes down to the sense of safety and trust for every part of that customer experience. So another thing we like to focus on is where's the exit door? Is there a dedicated exit vestibule? How well lit is that? A lot of security equipment becomes part of the background of the experience. So while the cameras are always present, a lot of people don't notice those. They become part of the background, like exit signs or emergency lighting. So through the architecture, the location of an exit door, does it exit into a side alley? Does it go back to the front of the building? Is it through the lobby you came in the beginning? That being mindful of that part of the experience as well is important, in addition to cameras and proper lighting.
No, and I mean, I've been to hundreds of dispensaries nationwide, and I've been to dispensaries where it's inviting. You walk in, there's a good experience, there's a good element, and when you leave, it drops you off in an alleyway where there's trash and a bump, and you're like, like you didn't want me anymore. I gave you my money, and you basically threw me out the door, and that's where you want me to exit. I'm nervous. I'm in an alleyway. I got to make a quick left to get back on the street that originally I started on, or something of that nature, or it's just not inviting. And I leave. I started off the experience very well at that location. There were pictures on the walls and paintings and good customer service, but then you just threw me out on the street. And you talked about security, working with again. I keep harping on the fact that we're an architect company more when it comes to security than an actual installer. We can work closely with, if the walls are going to be black, there's no reason why you need to have white cameras on that black wall.
Right,
You
right.
can have black cameras, you can have purple cameras, you can have things that don't just stand out. and still communicate that there's a level of security. Maybe there's cameras that are over the registers that you can see, or there's a monitor. I always like to I'm a very a visual person. You might have want to have some sort of video of that. But there's a lot of times where I'll see a design, architect does a great job, does a great design, never really engaged the security consulting or architect group. And then security comes in and kind of just ruins his design, right in the middle of a picture, there's a camera, or something's blocking something. And you're like, all these things could have been avoided, and you could have definitely saved a lot of money.
Yeah.
There's a many times, we'll save our customers 20,000 dollars easily just by making some suggestion about a wall or something of that nature.
Yep, right. And to that point, coordinating finishes and how that integrates with the overall aesthetic of the space. There's a lot of our higher end designs where we've added architectural features like soffits or decorative columns or drop beams, especially around social media moments. Those are the areas to really coordinate the integration of security equipment. If we're creating a moment for social media interaction for that brand with a unique backdrop or interactive feature, we want to be mindful of where are the cameras around there and other security equipment. And then we have that discussion with you about, well, can we move this a few feet this way, and what ripples does that create? Does it require adding an additional camera? Do we need to coordinate the finish of that? And often, going back to what you said earlier, your first pass at like a licensing level floor plan, that's all it is. That's a floor plan. As our designs progress and we evolve the interior elevations and we work on the ceiling design, there is absolutely coordination that is critical, to make sure that we're not creating more challenges than necessary for the security equipment in terms of ceiling features and sightlines.
No, I think the key is always keep in mind that it's a retail environment.
Yes.
I've been in retail. I've worked for Sears. I worked for Macy's. I worked for, a lot of retail companies, and I think that it's always that customer experience that the architect is always focusing on and should do. The security enhances that design, that vision, and that's why I always feel it's very important to have the two the architect and the security people working closely on a lot of projects as you're going forward, simply because not only is it going to enhance the day-to-day business, and an architect designs something, the construction company builds it, the mill worker puts the cases in and all that, and for the most part the security installer installs the equipment, but for the most part, that then those processes are done. The owner has to run that business day to day. I've been to locations where it was a bank at one time, and they forgot to shut off the teller window, and yeah, and you were able to open up to the outside, and there's a teller window. There was another fast food location, the same kind of, and you want to say, well, somewhere somebody missed those components, and that's really the importance of not only having good aesthetics, but also being able to make sure that the customer and the employees, more important, they feel safe and they feel secure when they're in that location.
Right, right. And so I think in terms of misunderstandings and missed opportunities, the language we use is important, right? So at VALERE, we refer to the room product is stored in as secure storage, not as a vault. We find that a vault people have a connotation. They think solid, concrete walls or
Right.
heavily reinforced. And while every state has their own requirements and definitions of what secure storage is, and some even refer to it as a vault, those security requirements are often very easily met and not as intense as our clients might have an image in their head. But so I would want to ask you about what other misunderstandings around security do you see popping up in the cannabis sector?
Well, you brought up a very good point. Just to stay on the secured storage, which is what we call it also, is the terminology of vault. So a vault is like you see in a bank, a metal structure. There's requirements. It's a UL rated. A vault for an average dispensary probably would run you close to $50,000, $60,000 to build. No state, maybe Connecticut, but for the most part, no state really requires you to have a vault,
Right.
a bank vault. But a lot of people are under that. They're either confused by the language by the state because the state might have wrote vault, or they're confused by not getting good direction. So they'll look at that initially. 11 years ago, they were building vaults, and you don't need a vault. Then they moved to reinforce a cinder block, and that component. And if you ever know anything about cinder block, it breaks pretty easily, and now you have to reinforce. But there's still a cost to that. So, as this industry evolves, you need to be able to evolve to that. And right now we use 9-gauge wire meshing throughout the United States, which is pretty acceptable by everyone. It's flexible. It's the mesh. It's the wire that you would see like in a maximum security prison. Meets all of the guidelines, like especially in New York or New Jersey, and it's cost efficient. 10 years ago, they may not have thought about that. Now we're talking about how do we improve the security of a facility when it comes to cameras. Is there, the video of 10 years ago was a lot different. The video 30 years ago was black and white, analog. But is there AI technology? Do you have the ability to integrate the POS system with the camera system? Is there infrared? We started using some infrared, which comes a lot from other industries. What that tells you is you can actually watch where the customers are going on your sales floor. This actually came from auto dealerships. They wanted to see where customer flow was by using infrared technology, and then they put their best cars there. Same thing in retail. If we can understand, they walk in the store and a lot of people gravitate to the left and they look to the wall. That might be a good place for you to put the product, but you don't know that unless you had some sort of AI, infrared, some sort of technology. And I think we're going to see that evolve, and I think a lot of times, a lot of people don't see or understand that. And, again, anybody could put up cameras and anyone can do alarm systems and access control, but really the question is, are you going to use it day to day? And the ones that use it day to day, I find are much more profitable than the ones that feel, oh, it's just a necessary thing I needed so I can pass the state inspection. Let's just use Ring cameras. Well, I have Ring cameras in my house, but it's not something you would want to use for your day-to-day business. Could you pass an inspection? I don't know. In that state, maybe. Same thing with your designs. I think a lot of times when you do your design, I think your designs are geared for day-to-day use, not just to have a design, not a cookie cutter design.
Right, right. The retail experience is, how that space is designed shapes the way people flow through that space. Wayfinding is a huge part of what we take into consideration in all of our projects. Both like it should be very visible where the front door is. And as soon as you enter the space, you should be able to pick up on there's the POS stations, there's the display, and how it's designed and laid out impacts how people flow through that space. So we can craft that experience to some degree while keeping it open and flexible. But
Yeah.
you said something that I found very interesting. You mentioned reviewing the security footage to influence how a store is laid out for display cases and other items. And I think that's something that a lot of our clients might not think about or overlook in terms of using their security equipment for more than just meeting security requirements, but actually as a tool for them to keep evolving their business.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times business owners don't use their security device or security equipment, I should say, to enhance their business and their profitability. You can look in the parking lot. You can see what kind of customer flow. Are there more customers that come in from the left side of your building or from the right side of your building? Where should I advertise? What's the experience inside that lobby? The huge difference between designing an urban environment dispensary retail or a country retail location. Is there a waiting room? And if there is a waiting room, what am I communicating that will enhance the sales? Is there
Right.
anything that is there? And again, I go back to security should be involved in that experience. I went to a beautiful location in downtown Boston, right next to Fenway Park, and there was like a art gallery that was designed in the base, at the location. And so it wasn't just a come in, buy my product, get out of my store, go out on the alleyway mentality. It was a little bit of spend some time here, you're welcomed here. It was very inviting, use that mentality when it comes to that. So again, when that architect gets involved and they do something like that, one of the first things I looked at when I was in that little area that had the art gallery was, is there any security? Because if I wanted to shoplift, could I bring something in? Or, we do a lot of business for large MSOs. One of the largest MSOs I ever did business with, their biggest loss is sweatshirts and shirts and paraphernalia, more so than anyone stealing cannabis. That they have a bigger shoplifting loss in that aspect, in that realm, than they do in actual people trying to take a product from them. And a lot of times I think people miss that when they're doing their design.
Because there's so much focus on the product itself, not all the supporting merchandise for that brand. That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
To your point with the art gallery, we worked on the Westfield location of Pioneer Valley Trading Company. And part of that design, part of that experience with their brand, they have a record lounge within their retail location. So talk about a sense of safety and security. Someone entering that space, possibly for the first time, there's people hanging out listening to music. It's a very casual, very comfortable, very inviting atmosphere. So like with the art gallery, creating spaces like that adds to that non-tangible, that intangible sense of feeling safe.
No, exactly. Today we're talking about retail and dispensaries, but that goes into, there's six different business lines in the cannabis industry, and we work on all of them. But that goes into the cultivation mentality, consumption lounges. There's a lot of other aspects of the cannabis industry that the architect can get involved in outside of retail, but it all falls back again if it's a retail environment, consumption lounges, retail dispensaries, things of that nature. What is the what is the experience at that location, and what are you trying to communicate? I've seen locations, they're communicating is come buy my stuff and leave. Okay. And if that's the design and that's what the business owner wants, then okay, you
Mhm.
can design it and we can design the security for that mentality. If it's like, no, I want you here, I want you experience, or this is my home, or this is my environment, then I think that's where the value of that architect not doing cookie cutters, and that's really, I see that when I go throughout the United States sometimes, where I'm like, this is a nice design, but it doesn't fit in this urban environment. Or it's a nice
Right, right.
design, but not really. It's you're in a historical town, and you're not designing to be that historical town.
Right, right. Every retail location is unique and independent, but it's still, as good design often does, it should relate to the context it's in to some regard that's appropriate for the project.
Yeah, definitely, and I fully agree with that. I fully agree. What would you say was your biggest challenge when it came to architects' designs? What would you say is the one challenge that you always have to overcome?
Appropriately sizing the spaces that support the main function of that retail environment. We often see requests to reduce break room size or really minimize the back of house spaces to create a larger sales floor. And generally, our approach is starting out, schematic plan, it's about a 50-50 split for front of house and back of house. And that tends to shake out true for, a range of square footage for dispensaries. But the push to reduce back of house spaces, it gets challenging having those conversations with clients, because that directly impacts a customer experience. If you have a tiny break room that doesn't facilitate a space dedicated for your employees to have lockers, to store personal items, to take their lunch break, to be inside when the weather's not nice. Noise from that can spill onto your sales floor, which could impact customers' experience. Um, and in addition to that, creating appropriately sized spaces for your employees impacts their happiness at work. And we can design the best dispensary in the world, you can design the best security layout in the world, but if a business has grumpy employees, that's out of our control, and that directly impacts the business and that customer experience. So designing spaces appropriately is the biggest challenge.
I fully agree. I think adding to that is designing facilities to be successful. I find a lot of times I'll look at a design and I'll say, well, what if you're successful? Can you handle it? Your secured storage room is way too small for you to be successful. Or you have two registers, you should have four. Or even on the other side, you have 20 registers and you don't have the capacity to have 20 registers in your facility. So a lot of times I see sometimes the design is not done where either you're thinking you're going to be successful, or done where you come to some conclusion that you're going to be that much more successful than you really could be, because
Right.
the building is only the average dispensary in the United States runs around 3,000 square feet. So you put somewhere X amount of POS terminals in a 3,000 square foot facility, 6, 8, whatever. You don't need 24. It's not going to happen. And the same thing is if you have the smallest dispensary I've ever seen in the United States was in New York City. It's illegal. I'll grant you that. But guess how big? It's on 8th Avenue in Manhattan. Guess how big the dispensary was?
600 square feet.
20 square feet. 20. It was 4 by 5. That was it. The front door is the glass door that you opened up. You walked in, you sat in a booth, you closed the glass door behind you. There was a roll down at night. There were 5 cameras and they were good to go. And, their secured storage room was this little file cabinet at the bottom. That was it. But now, obviously 20 square feet is not the norm and that's the way you want. But I see a lot of times where I look at the design and I'm saying, well, you've limited yourself. You can only be so good at this location based on that design. And if that works for you, great. Or on the opposite side, you don't need that Walmart location for your dispensary because you can't support that volume of work initially, maybe grow into it. But I've seen, you've seen them too, abandoned Targets or Walmarts and they're trying to build a dispensary and carve it into that. Well, carve a normal dispensary, and then if you grow, then God love you, you grow.
Right, right. Appropriately sized spaces to support the functions you're aiming for, which
Yeah.
goes back to early project phases when we collect a lot of information. That's where we start with our projects. Goals, wants, needs from our clients about how they want to operate the business, the type of user experience they're trying to craft. All that informs our designs, which then we coordinate with you for that security design.
Yeah, sure. See, we make a good team.
Absolutely.
And we bring in some good installers. They do a good job. They make sure that the client's happy. One of the things that we always have conversations with the architect is the IT room, or the storage room. How big should it be? How where should it be located? It's not usually a factor in a retail, but obviously, if you did a big grow facility, the largest we ever did was 450,000 square feet in Nevada. Putting that IT room in the right spot can save you thousands of dollars. Same thing.
Absolutely.
Same thing with a retail. Where is that IT room going to be located? Where the security equipment also go in there? How big should it be? Who has access to it? What kind of devices do you need to put on that? Where's the camera placement and all that? So
Mhm.
I think that there's a lot of times where, again, that value comes into play where a lot of owners say, "Oh, we'll get you involved. Our architect is designing the floor plan," and we're like, "Okay, but we're more than willing to work with that architect, especially if they've never done it. Your experience, and I highly recommend you use a experienced person in the industry that you're in. If you're going to be firearms, get a firearm designer. If you're going to be in the pawn or jewelry, if you're going to be in the cannabis, you want to use a company like you more so than somebody who's just learning. They may have been a good multifamily architect, but there are nuances to this industry, and those nuances can cost you a substantial amount of money down the line, especially, a lot of times I tell people, what if you're successful? Does that architectural design support you being successful?
Right, right, and I completely agree. And from a fun design standpoint, to your item about a successful business, think about if you want to open up a second location. That sense of security and feeling of safety that's been designed into your first location, translating that to a second location. And as we talked about previously, the unique challenges with existing spaces, applying that brand identity through design and carrying that sense of safety and security that's part of that user experience onto a second location. Those are fun design challenges for us to tackle.
I can imagine that. I mean, the branding alone is how important it is to this industry, and people on the. It only takes one negative comment to hurt you, hurt your location, especially if you're a one store location, and that the importance of the architect working with the general contractor and with the construction team, and making sure that as much of the exposure is eliminated. We do a lot of outside looking. Is that parking lot safe? Is it well lit? Is there a way to get on the roof, and can someone cut a hole in the roof? Is there a way to go through are there bowers in the front? Or if not bowers, are there flower pots in the front? Or is there something that can restrict it? Because you don't want to wind up on the news on something that you could have avoided. And it's amazing the number of, we do Google alerts, and every single day we get a Google alert about a cannabis facility in the United States having some sort of security issue. And some of it we look and we go, well, they drove the car right through the front window because there was no security, or you didn't use the right glass on the front window, or you didn't have a roll down on the front window, or your design allowed we try and move the secured storage if we can, work with the architect. And one of our secret sauces is we try and move that secured storage interior and not have an exterior wall. I think that there's a big benefit to that, but it's those little things that sometimes keep you out of the news, keep you out of the press. A couple of years ago, we had those lootings that went on, and we dealt with looting problems in dispensaries across the United States, and some of them could have been avoided. Some of them, you go, well, you had a good secure door, and right next to it was a sheetrock wall. They just went through the sheetrock.
Right.
Why did you allow that? Did not someone see that?
Mhm, mhm.
Good conversation.
Yes, always insightful talking with you, Tony. I think we touched on most of these
I, I believe
questions you outlined. So
I believe we did. We spent a good hour. Anyone who stayed with us for the whole hour, I hope they got some value of this. I think that I think there's a lot of good points that both of us have brought up. I think the one takeaway I have, and I've always had, is that interaction. The interaction of, form a team, and make sure that the team works together. We do weekly, sometimes monthly calls during the process of the build out, but even more so is step back, and when you put together that team, is that team going to give you the ability to run your business a year from now? Or is there something that you may not have thought of, that maybe if you do it now, it's not going to be a problem, whether it's plumbing or lighting or construction or walls or access or flow, or I have to expand my waiting room, or what if there's a line outside, or all of those components. I think a lot of times that's where the value of a company like you come into play and help that client not only be able to do a good build out, but also be successful for the future.
Yes, in terms of future proofing, we see this more for cultivation and manufacturing than for retail. But one of the services we provide is a comprehensive plan for a building, a space to fit your program. We often see cultivation facilities have a phased approach, sometimes two, three, four phases to a build out as they expand or plan to expand. And it's those items coordinating with security, locating a centrally located IT security room, where in the first phase it may be on the edge of the work zone, but after phase two, it's more centrally located. Planning for chases that have access panels, maybe running conduit for future wiring and future equipment, and having that big picture view of not just the immediate project, but future phases and expansion is important, both from an architectural side of thing and coordinating with security and other vendors as well for that.
No, I fully agree. We do a lot of risk assessments. We'll come out to the location, and we do a lot on the West Coast, California, Colorado, Oregon, and Washington, because they're more established businesses. They've been around for a while, and some of the things that uncover, are easy fixes, and sometimes they're not even very costly fixes. But you want to say you would have been able to prevent this from occurring. You lost $100,000, or you've had three employees stealing, or you've had this situation. Had you just done that when you initially did your design, and there's a lot of times to that. But you know, well, thank you for having me on. I appreciate it. I really do. I think it's definitely a long time coming. We love working with you guys. We love your designs. You're horrible bowlers. I could say that.
Yeah, we definitely need to improve our bowling game.
Yes, you do.
Yep, yep. But it's always great chatting with you, Tony. Your insights into security and the specifics of the cannabis sector are always great to hear.
So, again, my name is Tony Gallo, managing partner of Sapphire Risk Advisory Group. Can be reached, our website is sapphirerisk.com. And if you have any questions that you wanted to talk to me about, by all means, you can reach me at tgallo@sapphirerisk.com.
Thank you for joining us today. I'm James Sowell. I'm Vice President of VALERE Architects. You can find us on LinkedIn and Instagram and on our website at valerearchitects.com, VALERE architects.com. Thank you for your time today, and thank you for the discussion, Tony.
Thank you very much. Glad to be on.